I hope you can hear me and see me okay. I'm here. My name's Steve Lindsey. And we're going to have the second part of the chat. I started on Tuesday afternoon regarding music publishing, and the same applies again. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to type them in, and I'll try and address them in as you ask them. Just wanted to also say that probably I won't do any recapping as such, other than to say that it might be a good idea to keep in mind the song Tainted Love that we touched upon last Tuesday, because I think it's handy for us to keep in mind that we're talking about the songwriting, the composition of a song or a piece of music, rather than the recording of a song. So if you remember, Tainted Love was written by a guy called Ed Cobb, and he has a publisher. However, as you will know, there are many, many different recordings of Tainted Love by all sorts of number of people, from Marilyn Manson to Soft Cell and way beyond that as well. All those recordings are owned by different recording companies, but Tainted Love is written by one songwriter and published by one publisher. So keep that in mind as we move on to the next section now. So we covered rather all of the areas that the publishing rights that you as a writer will have intrinsically when you write a piece of music. Okay, now, when you may not want the responsibility of dealing with all of the administration that takes place with regards to safeguarding copyrights, but also looking after royalties that flow in. So that's when a publisher enters the picture. And that's what we'll be dealing with today. So you've got a whole package of rights, and a publisher says, I think your material is fantastic. Let me publish the material, and you will get an offer of a publishing deal. So what does a publisher actually do? Because you can easily publish your own material, but you need to have quite a lot of a whole set of skills and expertise to cover everything. And so a publisher, I'll go through the list now, and you'll probably have that sheet that you can refer to as well. So a publisher takes on the responsibility of registering your songs with IMRO, and by extension with the MCPS. And you remember that we spoke about the MCPS. It's a parallel organization that uses the same database as IMRO. So when you register a song with IMRO, it's automatically registered with the MCPS. So the publisher knows exactly, can talk the talk with IMRO, and knows exactly how to ensure that the registrations are all done properly and in a watertight manner. Next, publishers collect money on your behalf, and that's done through membership of its own membership of IMRO, but also membership of the MCPS, which allows for the collection of mechanical royalties, and also the publishers are on the lookout. And the third thing is policing those royalties. So publishers are always on the lookout to make sure that nothing slips through the net, that everything that's out there to be collected is actually collected, and is proactively ensuring that job is done as efficiently as possible, either by chasing and inquiring MCPS themselves, or IMRO, or any other organization that may be responsible for paying royalties through to publishing royalty through. Fourthly, a publisher protects copyrights. They'd be protecting and policing royalties, but also publishers need to ensure that the legal copyright aspect of it all is well looked after, and to ensure, for example, that there are infringements that might take place. Very often, over the years, there's been lots of instances where rappers and hip hop artists have sampled music. That has to be done. That has to be done properly. And sometimes publishers and artists don't like the material being infringed. So there's sometimes these things can go legal, and publishers have the responsibility of taking care of business in that respect as well. Then we have in accounting royalties that come in to the publisher, accounting those royalties to the writers, and that's done generally on a 6 monthly basis, and involves a lot of number crunching, and I'll come on to that a little bit later on, particularly with regards to income that coming in from streaming. Yeah, I'll go into a lot more detail about a few of these other things. Another couple of things that publishers provide, another services, being creative actually, is helping artists get their music out into the world and to be used. And we use the word exploitation. In publishing terms, the word exploitation is a good word. It's seen as a very, very positive thing, in the sense that most writers write music for it to be used all over the place by as many people as possible, in as many different ways as possible. And it's a publisher's responsibility to ensure that a songwriter's piece of music is distributed, is circulated, and is pushed in front of potential users to get as much earning potential out of a piece of music as possible. We also have a creative aspect that publishers provide with artistic advice, with feedback to writers. I remember when I was in bands and writing and trying to write songs many years ago, I really appreciated input and opinions and critiques that I would get from my publisher at the time, and from anyone else that I kind of was in the business. I would be all ears and try and learn and try and get some feedback from these people as to how I could improve as a writer, or what I could change or tweak here and there. And very often publishers have a lot of experience in this area, and some more than others. I mean, every publisher is different, and some publishers have stronger expertise in some areas and some in others. You might get some publishers who are stronger as far as copyright policing and royalty number crunching and stuff like that. And then you get other publishers who have better contacts with ad agencies perhaps, or film companies, and can be more use in that area. And then you'll get some publishers who are very hands-on and often will get down to nitty-gritty as far as changing perhaps a lyric here or there, or whatever. It might be, it depends. And lastly, this is not a completely exhaustive list, but publishers also have international connections. And whether you're talking about a multinational major publisher having offices spread out all over the world, or an independent publisher like I am, I will have a hand-picked patchwork quilt of international sub-publishers that I will have set up over many years, and they will be doing essentially the same job that I do in this territory, my territory being Ireland and the UK. And I will have separate sub-publishers dotted around the world: Germany, North America, Japan, Australia, each one doing the same job that I do, but in their own territories, very much keeping an eye on the local stuff. So ensuring that registrations are done properly in those territories, making sure that royalties are picked up efficiently in those territories, and then fed back through to me. How are we doing for questions? I'll just double check the questions here. Let's see what we have. Nothing through so far, but we've got plenty of time for Q&As at the end. But feel free to drop any questions as we go. So there are two basic types of agreements that you will get offered by a publisher. One is called an ESA, which stands for Exclusive Songwriting Agreement. And this is what you will be offered. It tends to be what's offered by a major publisher. And it will be, it'll cover, it'll mean that you're exclusively signed to that publishing company for a set period of time. And whatever you write within that period of time will be published by that publisher. And historically, traditionally, that's meant that if you're an artist and you have a record deal, then it would be related to say the release cycle of an album, that you'll have a period of an album that comes into existence, and that package of songs will be published by the publisher. And very often, if you're signed with a major publisher, they might be coterminous. In other words, if you're signed to Warner Brothers Records and you're signed to Warner Chappell Publishing, then they tend to be linked in some way, shape, or form. The other type of songwriting agreement is called a song assignment, and this doesn't cover a specific period of time, but what it would do is it would cover a song or a package of songs, and will be a finite list of songs that will be attached to that agreement. And you might actually be able to sign, well, you would certainly be able to sign another publishing agreement in parallel, as long as it's not the same list of songs. So it's exclusive to those songs that are on the schedule of the contract, but you could write other songs for other publishers. Let's see now. We've got a question here. It says, how much money does someone make from streaming their track? Very good question. And we'll come on to streaming a bit later on as we drill down into the royalties and what you'll actually see from your income stream and what a publisher will take. I'll just come on to that now, in fact. So if you just bear with me. So the main areas of an agreement will also be on that piece of paper that with the handout, and it covers the territory, which can be anything from just a single country to the world, the universe, whatever. Next is the term, so you'll have an exclusive songwriting agreement will have a specific term. There may be options to extend, but it'll always have a basic term which will apply initially. As far as the song assignment agreement is concerned, again, it could be anything from the publisher was given that package of songs for a period of time, could be 3, 7, 5, whatever is agreed between yourself and the publisher. There is we touched on it in the last session, this thing called life of copyright, which is 70 years after the composer's death. Well, that's a term as well. And in the old days, that was the norm in publishing deals. So you were actually signing your rights or signing the songs over to a publisher, essentially in perpetuity. Nowadays, that tends to be that's not that common these days. I think it's more common here than it is in the UK, and it's totally negotiable. It's in the publisher's interest for it to be a longer term, because the publisher needs time to be able to exploit the material and then to see the benefit of royalties earned to come back through the pipelines to pay the writer. Because publishing is a very, very long, drawn out process. If you imagine a song coming into existence, it can take several months for a song to be registered properly, first of all with IMRO, and then for those registrations to filter out through the world, and then for the sub-publishers that a publisher might have to register locally as well, belt and braces. And then for the song to be exploited, songs can have a very long life and can be, like with Tainted Love, can see cycles of income coming over many, many years. And then the royalties earned all over the world. The further afield a song earns some royalties, the longer it takes for the money to come back through the pipelines, either through the sub-publishers picking up the royalties in the particular territory and then paying the original publisher back here, and then me accounting to the writer every 6 months. So you can easily have a 2-year period, 3-year period before royalties filter back to the songwriter. And this is quite normal. And the good thing is that when a song comes into existence, you can't unwrite it. They exist. They can't, you can't stop them earning money if they have some value. And they never die. The earnings might ebb and flow, but at least they'll now, a decent song, the income will never dry up, which is good. Another song here. Another question. No, that's to do with, it's a technical question here. I'll ignore it. So then you come to another part of the agreement, which is the commercial points. Now, when you publish your own material, in other words, before you sign a publishing deal, whatever money is earned by a piece of music, 100% of the earnings will flow through to you. When you sign a publishing deal, obviously the publisher will take a share and pass the remainder on to you. So this is again completely negotiable. And from my experience as a publisher in the UK, I would say a bog standard deal would be 75% to the writer, and the publisher retains 25%. There are all sorts of deals. In the old days, it used to be 50-50, as I discussed the other day on Tuesday. That would be back in the old days when publishers tended to do a lot more. Say in the area of sheet music, they would be printing the sheet music, distributing it, doing a huge amount of mechanical legwork, as it were. So it was a completely reciprocal arrangement back then. And as I say, the center of universe changed a bit during the 70s and 80s. So record companies had more of a responsibility as far as promoting and marketing artists. So publishers accepted a lesser percentage. So 60-40 was quite common, 70-30, 75-25. The bigger name the artist, the more that the artist can demand from a publisher. And so if you're a big named artist, you could maybe demand a deal which is 80-20 in your favor, or even 85-25. It does depend on, sometimes major publishers want a large market share to keep their shareholders happy, and so they might pay might be willing to split their royalties that they're collecting on behalf of an artist or on behalf of a writer, 85-25, something like that. Sorry, 85-15. So then we've got other aspects that a publishing deal brings to, does on behalf of a writer. So the writer warrants that they have the right to assign these songs or to the publisher. The publisher then has the obligations of accounting, generally biannually, to the writer, and accounting procedures. There's all sorts of ways that the writer can cross-check that the publisher is doing everything properly, accounting procedures, etc. As I've said, publishers sometimes have to act on a writer's behalf when legal situations arise. I've had situations recently where one of the songs that I've published, it seemed that a third party had infringed a particular melody line, so I had to get musicologists involved, get lawyers involved, and so this is something that an area, and I over the years have built up quite a lot of experience. I'm not a lawyer, I have no legal qualifications whatsoever, but it's amazing how much I've picked up from dealing with contracts, but also dealing with the copyright law. So then at the end of a contract, there's always the schedule, and it'll be the list of songs that that writer is bringing with them to the deal. Certainly in the case of a song assignment deal, it could be just one song, or it could be a whole batch of songs, a multitude of albums. But outside of that list, as I say, the writer is free to sign other songs to other publishers. Let's see if we have any more questions here. No. Okay. So you'll remember I was talking about income streams on Tuesday, and IMRO, when you sign with the publisher, you will say goodbye to receiving 100% of your IMRO money, because what happens when a publisher enters the picture is that the IMRO will be notified, and what comes into effect then is what's called the writer's share and the publisher's share. The writer's share traditionally is 50% of the IMRO income, and the IMRO will pay the other 50% to the publisher. Now, that goes back to the old days when as I was saying, about 50-50 deals. But what happens now is that a publisher will, as part of the agreement, will say, okay, well, we are receiving, out of 100 euros earned by a song, 50 euros will go directly to the writer, and the other 50 euros will go to the publisher. But the publisher will say, okay, well, that's, in this day and age, not the spirit of the agreement. And as I say, when in my mind, the bog standard deal is 75-25. So the writer will have 50 euros, the publisher will have the other 50 euros, and split that down the middle. So 25 euros will be kept by the publisher, but the publisher will then pass on 25 euros to the writer. So the writer will end up at the end of the day with 50 euros and 25 euros, adding up to 75 euros. So it's effectively a 75-25 split. The publisher will also automatically be a member of the MCPS, which most writers are not. So writers won't be able to get mechanical royalties unless they have a publishing deal. They can join the MCPS directly themselves, but there is a cost involved, and it's far better for a publisher to be there, I think, to police those royalties, to receive those royalties on behalf of a songwriter. And we're talking mechanical devices, CDs, vinyl, and also an aspect of it is mechanical devices to listen to streaming now, but I'll come on to that a little bit later on, given the questionnaire earlier. So the MCPS will pay 100% of any royalties earned by a song in mechanical form through to the publisher, and the publisher will quite simply split that using 75-25 as an example. So 100 euros earned in mechanicals will go 75 euros to the writer, but via the publisher first. And if you've got, if you think back to Tuesday, another form of income stream, for example, is synchronization. So an ad agency will say, well, we'd like to pay 1,000 euros for the use of a song for in this, whatever ad it might be. So the publisher will negotiate the deal, might be even going to get more money out of it than the writer would have got normally. And the so 1,000 euros or 10,000 euros or 100,000 euros, depending on how big the ad is, will be received by the publisher. And if it's a 75-25 agreement, then 75% of that royalty, of that fee, will be passed on by the publisher to the writer. And and that's generally how things are split. There's a question here from Holly. Thanks so much for the talk today. Can you tell us how online music publishing then the question, oh, I see. Holly pressed enter too quickly. How online music publishing affected the music industry. Okay. Yeah, we'll come on to online in a second, if that's all right with you. In fact, no, we'll cover that now, because I think it's an area that is really important. With COVID-19 aside, the world was really, the streaming was booming. And so much so that essentially about 75% of the recorded music industry, as of just a few months ago, was made up of streaming activity. Downloading was negligible, and vinyl made up about 5%, and the other remainder of it was still CD sales. So about 75% was streaming, and so it's had a massive impact over recent years on the music industry. Now, the music industry took a real nosedive. It happened before the recession, but 2013 was the real low point of the worldwide music industry, and it's been the music industry as a whole has been growing since 2013, and was on course to great business until COVID-19 came along. Basically, I think that the graphs that I've seen are that, all things being equal and coronavirus aside, by 2021, I think about 95% of music consumption will be by streaming, and that basically that the glitch that we now have with coronavirus is going to, in some ways, it's going to actually help with streaming, because as more people are watching more films online, they're going to be streaming more online as well. There is going to be a drastic and dramatic reduction of income from live events. We're not going to see anything, festivals and large events, until probably summer of next year. There might be a few small venues come back before the end of this year, but streaming is going to be the lifeline that the music industry will benefit from. It's really sorry, just another question here. Some of those online arrangements seem musically different to what you expect from having heard a track. Sorry, I don't quite get that. Some of those online arrangements seem musically different to what you expect from having heard a track. Perhaps if you could explain a little bit more, Sarah, I can come back to you on that one. Streaming, the amount of money you can get from streaming, I'm talking just purely publishing here. And just to let you know that the good thing about streaming is that it's kind of eradicated piracy for a large part, because it seems that it's better for people who would have been pirating stuff just 5 years ago now. It's easier for them to actually pay a subscription for Spotify. You can't avail of Apple Music without a subscription anyway. So this is the booming area. It depends on which part of the world that you live in. In Scandinavia, it's all Spotify. Here, it's about 2/3 Spotify and 1/3 Apple Music. In America, it's neck and neck, Spotify and Apple Music. And in France, it's Deezer, a completely different organization again. So for the amount of your fees also depend on, the amount of money you earn from a track can also depend on the platform through which the stream is taking place. And probably the best way to think about the amount of money that you earn from a stream is to think of it like one play from one radio station to one person once. And I'll explain that a little bit more here. If you think about Today FM here, that radio station has 40,000 listeners, I think. That's the last count. Now, I'm not sure precisely how much you as a songwriter would get for one play on Today FM, but say, for sake of argument, say it's €5. I think it might be actually less than that. So if you think of one play on Today FM earning a songwriter €5, but if you then divide that €5 by the 40,000 people listening, you'll end up with 0.000125 cents. So streaming actually pays much better than that. And Spotify and Apple Music, in fact, do pay really proper rates. They pay quite fair rates. So the point is that if you only really get the benefit of streaming, or financially of streaming, if the number of streams is in the millions. It's something that we've learned. But the point I was going to come back to is that the music industry as a whole has bounced back from its very poor days towards the 2008, 2009, and is earning a huge amount of money now, COVID aside, and that it's in a much healthier state than previous when CD sales were going through the floor. Unfortunately, it's kind of it's more spread out now, in the sense that you can't, if you're a big named artist, you'll benefit still from CD sales. But if you're a smaller artist, the gap between the large earners and the lower earners is a massive gap there. And so it's very, very difficult for a new artist to break through into that higher category. Very, very difficult indeed. Any other questions here that we just wanted to kind of give you also that back in the old days, a CD, the amount of publishing money that that would be a part of the pie, as it were, would be, and still applies today, is that when you buy a CD across the counter in a shop, it's less than 10% of that price that you're paying will be in publishing, goes to the songwriters and publishers. Streaming wise, it's about 15% of the money that you pay in your subscription. It's about 15% of that goes to songwriters. So if you think about it in album terms, think of going back to a CD. An album, say an album costs €10. The publishing that would be picked up would be given from the record company to the MCPS to administer. The MCPS would then split that. It's about 8.5% actually. So would split that 8.5% with all of the publishers. Say you've got a 10-track album, so that would be split between 10 publishers, and then those 10 publishers, if you're talking about an album full of cover versions, there would be Tainted Love, The Power of Love, a Beatles song, maybe an album made up of very, very different covers, publishers, songwriters. So you'd have a song, saying that was written by 4 separate writers. They might end up with just a matter of a few cents per album. So publishing has always been the it really whittles down to quite a small amount of money. So you are totally dependent on millions and millions and millions of sales. Do we have any other questions here? I've been talking for 35 or 37 minutes here. Is there anything that anyone has any questions that we should cover before we run out of time? If not, I'll ramble on a bit more. So what we ended up with was that I'll get onto a hobby horse here. So what we need, I think, is for songwriters and for publishers to fight for a bigger piece of the pie. In this day and age, in the old days, certainly with vinyl records and CDs, record companies had the responsibility of manufacturing, paying for the recording, manufacturing, and distributing on trucks and vans physical product to record stores. The record stores would have to stock them, huge amount of space. People would go in and buy their money. It was a very, very physical business. Now with streaming that's booming, there's no distribution costs to speak of. The marketing costs, again, have dropped because nobody really advertises in the press, in newspapers and magazines to any large degree anymore. And we have no breakages. It's very, very, record companies themselves now make a large margin. And I think that the songwriters need to be recompensed a lot more than let's put it this way, record companies cannot justify the large percentage that they are taking. And that when, for example, a song, say an ad agency wants a song for an ad, what happens is that the synchronization will be split in 2 halves. One will be for the recording side, and the other will be for the publishing side. So if we're talking about Tainted Love again, the publisher of Ed Cobb will negotiate on behalf of the composition, and the record company who owns the particular recording that the ad agency wants will negotiate that side. And generally what happens is that there's an agreement is reached where each side, the publishing side and the recording side, will get an equal fee. Now, that's the way things work in synchronization, and that's a normal split these days. I think that there's no moral reason why a record company, unless it can be proven otherwise, why a record company can't take 50%, or if they can argue for, okay, well, they maybe have marketed that artist to the point where the ad agency is interested, that's great. So maybe that would justify a slightly larger percentage or a slightly different balance. But certainly, this is something I'm fighting for these days, is for writers and publishers to get more of a share of things. So I think there's just a clarification on a question here. Downloadable sheet music. Online downloadable sheet music often can seem quite different to the track you've listened to. All right, okay. I think we're talking about musical arrangements there, and that's something that that's a conversation for another day, I think. Perhaps sheet music is often dealt with. Publishers often outsource the score, the writing of a score to an outsource. Very often publishers don't read music, can't play an instrument, and are essentially pen pushers. So it often has to be outsourced, that a piece of music will be scored, and then very often there'll be a third party that the publisher will outsource to print up the music in much the same way that let's think of an example here now. Can't think of an example, but the music can be very different when you come to play a piece of music on reading the notes from how it sounds. Very difficult for me to deal with here in a short period of time. And I should make the point that if anyone has any other questions that can't be addressed here by me right now, my email address is available, and feel free to contact me after this chat with any particular questions. I'm very happy to get back to you individually. And I'm not sure if there's anything else that needs to be covered here. There's lots of things I could talk about, but it is handy for me to be prompted by particular questions that cross people's minds. Before I forget to mention it, though, I should say that there's another seminar, another 2 sessions next week, taking place on Tuesday and Thursday in much the same way that I've done these sessions. And it'll be Francis Mitchell who will be talking about self-management for artists. That'll be on Tuesday the 12th and on Thursday the 14th. And I presume at 3 o'clock on both occasions. Unless anyone's got any, wants to type in another question before we head off. Oh, Fion's back on again. Let's see if we can answer this question here. What if you post your recordings to social media like Facebook or Instagram? Well, it basically works. If you're posting your recordings to Facebook, it's through YouTube is the machinery, as it were. Even though I know you can go directly to YouTube, but it's very often better to receive more hits if you go via Facebook. YouTube, unlike Spotify and Apple Music, don't pay anywhere near the amount of money that they should be paying. It's what we call um, it's just nowhere near good enough, given that um, um, YouTube, it's their lifeblood is music, and they're not paying for it. They're using lots of people's creativity and paying very, very little amounts of money. You, if you have a recording, you've got it up on Spotify and Apple Music, then you will have gone through a process to make sure that metadata is included there. And that's all watermarked, so that whenever anyone streams that piece of music, or if that piece of music goes up on YouTube or through Facebook or whatever, there should be enough data imprinted in that for the whatever money is generated, wherever it may be generated, to filter back to you through IMRO and through the MCPS and to your publisher, and what if you, or directly to you if you don't have a publisher. It's very, very difficult to administer, but thankfully in this day and age, because it is all digital and it is all, I'm dealing with hundreds of thousands of data, lines of data, when I'm number crunching royalties earned by streaming. The likes of IMRO and MCPS are part of an organization called ICE, which is PRS and a CODA in Denmark. And the last distribution they did, I think it was 3 billion lines of data that they were dealing with in one particular distribution. It sounds crazy, but the machinery, the technology is there in place to administer royalties that are being earned on these micro levels. If you're just getting a handful of hits, or even quite a fair number of hits into the hundreds of thousands, unfortunately, the value per stream is still very small, and that's why it's rather pathetic. But hopefully, over time, we can get the streaming amount for songwriters in particular up to a decent level. As I say, feel free to email me any questions, and I'll leave it there for today. And thank you very much for checking in. I appreciate your interest, and keep writing songs. All the best. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.